Greetings, it's Mazzy. Let's talk about art. Let's talk about conceptual art. I love conceptual art. What is conceptual art? Now, obviously, since I am primarily a music channel, record channel, vinyl junkie, vinyl collector, music lover, I'm talking about conceptual album covers. Now, this is going to morph into several art disciplines: conceptual art, modernist surrealism, collage art. And this is obviously not a definitive list, but this is just a group of albums that I particularly enjoy the conceptual aspect of the curation of the creation of the cover art. Sounds so pretentious, doesn't it? And maybe it is, but I enjoy it and I love it. I know that's another reason I love vinyl albums, 12 by 12 cover art. And it taught me early on about various art movements, and I dove in and discovered it more. So I have done a series of videos, and just search my name in art. Maybe I should make a playlist of them. That's what I need to work on. But I've done collaborations with others on covers. I've done profiles on photographers and designers and illustrators and artists into the past. And this one's just, I wake up in the middle of the night and I think conceptually. And so I just decided to put this together and spur of the moment a little bit. And some people, okay, the whole concept of conceptual art in a way amuses me. And I've talked about this before, so those of you who have dived in and heard and watched some of my other videos on album cover art and the aesthetic of it, know my feeling of it. I love conceptual art. I love the idea. Now, conceptual art it primarily was around in the 60s and 70s. Also, obviously, it's there today. So we've gone beyond it. And, you know, I don't want to say beyond, but it's morphed into a lot of different things, very much like genres of music, subgenres and subgenres, and where it gets really silly and really ridiculous. But that's what's great about it. It's the creative aesthetic of it. Again, pretentious. But conceptual art, in a way, is when the concept of the final creation is more important than the final creation in many ways. So the idea is great. Conceptually, it's interesting, and then you see it and you go, what the, I could have done that. That's a whole other issue. And what I'm going to start with, and these are not in chronological order, I sort of grouped them together in the various disciplines a little bit, but again, these all overlap. And to me, the ultimate conceptual art cover is The Beatles from 1968. And it's actually, the name of the album is The Beatles. Over the years, we refer to the White Album. This particular pressing is an original UK top loader stereo. I don't have a mono. I'd love a mono, so I'll tell you my address if you have a mono you want to send me. Very rare. They had the number, the embossed cover of the Beatles with just the simple photographs here, and then it had a poster. Now, the designer of this is Richard Hamilton. Paul McCartney, in fact, was the most, even though John Lennon did his drawings, and they all came from the kind of art school discipline, especially Stu Sutcliffe, the early bass player of the Beatles. John doodled with it. During the 60s, Paul really immersed himself into the London and the modern art scene, and would go to the galleries long before, or somewhat, maybe a year or two before, John Lennon met Yoko Ono, and the rest is history and conceptual art movement. Now, I don't have any Yoko Ono albums here, who comes out of the Fluxus movement. So Google that, Fluxus, very conceptual movement in the early 60s. She was a huge part of. And again, this performance art and conceptual art is really interesting. Ironically, I don't feel her album covers emulate that as much. They're safer. Some of them are beautiful, but they're more photographic and not conceptually as interesting, just from my point of view. But Paul McCartney brought in a collage artist and painter, Richard Hamilton, a UK artist of the day, and came up with this. Now, the original concept was going to be called A Doll's House, and there's a painting of that that would have been on the cover, an illustration that turned up later in the UK and in Netherlands in an album called Beatles Ballads. But because the band Family had a song called A Doll's House or Doll's House, the Beatles changed the title of their album and just simply went back and named it. The only album they ever put out under their name, self-titled. And I think this is amazing. Again, people, get criticized it a little bit, like what is this? I mean, how original is that? I could have done that. Well, you didn't do it. And Richard Hamilton did it, and the Beatles loved it, and it became infamous. And there's a great series of conceptual collector shows under the auspices of We Collect White Albums, or I Collect White Albums. Google it and see this presentation. And the artist puts all them in numerical order, and they're copies that he's collected that have been drawn on. And I think he only collects the ones that are numbered. But check that out. But Richard Hamilton, that kind of got me into the art scene. Well, Sgt. Pepper too, and Klaus Voormann's great album Revolver. But I'm going to go start with, aside from that conceptual piece, with the surrealism, with surrealist artists. And obviously, the most famous, probably conceptually, might be Salvador Dali. And Salvador Dali did this great cover art for Jackie Gleason Presents Lonesome Echo. There's a surrealistic aspect, a loneliness aspect. It's a great photograph here of Jackie Gleason and Salvador Dali, seemingly the unlikely couple, right? What I think this is an amazing cover. This is actually a good album. I like Jackie Gleason's sort of orchestration bits, obviously a far cry from the Honeymooners. He was a band leader and did some really cool albums. Maybe now we would put them in the category of lounge music and easy listening, but they're fantastic records. And this is a very famous album of mine. This is a mono version pressing on Capitol Records. I just showed this because this has been on my turntable over and over, and like every fifth record I play this again. Out There by Eric Dolphy. And I left off the name of the artist last time, it escaped me, and his name is Richard Jennings, and he goes by the name Prophet. And this is very Salvador Dali influence. Again, a very surreal cover, wonderful jazz Out There album, beautiful album. Since there are no horns, it doesn't have that edge, that high edge that horns, reeds would have, trumpets would have, but it's fantastic. Excuse me, with the cello playing of Ron Carter. Some of it is intense, fast, some of it is mellow and introspective, but just a gorgeous recording and a very favorite of mine. This one hits close to home because it is one of the photographers that I represent, and this is a photographer, Michel Clement. This is a 1987-88 album, I believe, by the artist Phoebe Snow, 1989, excuse me, for Elektra Records. You probably know she got famous earlier in the 70s because of her beautiful voice and album Poetry Man. What's amazing about this is my photographer, Michel Clement, did this from a series of images she was working on, a style she was working on. This is pre-Photoshop. This is not Photoshop. After a while, she would stop doing this kind of work because everybody wanted her to do all these kind of layers that she just didn't want to do, and she was not a Photoshop artist. Everything she did was either in the camera or in the darkroom, organically, analog style photography. This was shot, and I'll tell you about this. What's great about it, with the clock and the Surrealist, it's a very, influenced by the Dalis of the world and the Surrealism movement. She went to New York and photographed in a studio Phoebe Snow and shot some beautiful black and white Polaroids, 4x5 Polaroids of Phoebe Snow, and various film things that she shot in black and white. Developed them, printed them in the studio. Now, this was a time when Phoebe Snow didn't really feel physically, attractive. And so she just wanted part of her face shown. She was wrapped in this beautiful black fabric, and Michelle did a series of photographs. She came back to the studio, built these mini sets, literally mini sets. This is all realistic, and shot with what was known at the time of Polapan film. Polaroid did an instant 35mm style film, which has this green tint to it. This wasn't added in post-production. That's the nature of the film, and did a whole series of Polapan. There was these great films, and Michel was shooting Type 55, which is a Polaroid film. It's the back of the 4x5 proofing film, and that's used as a negative to make the print. So this is done by Michel Clement. The art director, the designer who took the images after the fact and designed it, was Carol Bobolts at Elektra Records in late 1989. There was actually a subsequent video. The video artist took Michel's concept and made a video on it, and it had a song that was somewhat of a hit. Which one is it called? If We Can Just Get Through the Night, maybe? I don't even remember the name of the hit. This is actually a really good record. I haven't listened to it in a while, and I plan on putting it on the turntable again, but conceptually, it's a beautiful, beautiful album. And then also in terms of the Surrealist movement, in 1968 or 69, this album came out by Moby Grape, and the graphic artist Bob Cato designed this to emulate surrealistic paintings, again, of Dali and others, and put this collage together. Bob Cato for Columbia Records. This is the album, the follow-up to the debut of Moby Grape. It came with a separate second album of Grape Jam, of jams, with Mike Bloomfield and Al Cooper. This has grown in stature. The last cut on side 1, you have to change your turntable to 78, and it is called Just Like Gene Autry, a Foxtrot by Skip Spence. And it features an introduction by Arthur Godfrey, the old Arthur Godfrey of old radio days. But I love this cover. This was nominated also for a Grammy for Best Cover Art of that year. But a fantastic cover, and Bob Cato did all the collages on this. To me, a record which should have come out, and it was ahead of its time. The photographer Robert Whitaker who photographed the Beatles quite a bit in Japan and over the years, like mostly in 1966, did a whole series of what he called conceptual, surrealistic photographs of the Beatles. You might have seen the shots like of a nail going into John's head and Paul and George and holding springs. And in fact, the covers of Beatles 65 with the seasons with the leaves were done by Robert Whitaker. But his most infamous cover that actually never was officially released was this, known now as the Butcher Babies. The original concept of this album, in a way, they thought it was like an anti-war thing. It never was meant to be a shot originally, but when Capitol was putting out these collections of singles and leftover album cuts, there were songs they took early from Revolver, before Revolver came out. They took the hits of the time, We Can Work It Out, Day Tripper, Yesterday, and Nowhere Man, and put these on this album. And it's a great comp, actually, really good comp. They actually got outrage from radio stations and retailers and pasted over the trunk cover, which horrible cover. They were still have been afraid to put this out. It's been sort of always behind the scenes. It's been done on an insert of their Rarities album, but it's never been put out as a cover. I always thought they should have put that at least a record store day, limited edition. But I think with the climate, this would still be controversial, but it's an amazing shot. Then we get into 1967. Again, I'm not going in any kind of order here, but Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol is the consumer pop artist of the 1960s. You know, the whole Brillo pads and the soapbox, the soup cans, Campbell soup cans, and of course, he kind of designed and curated, put together or brought together Velvet Underground, added Nico as a singer, and this album became infamous. It didn't sell very well, but it's one of the most influential records and sold more after the fact than ever. Rumor has it sold up to 6,000 copies when it initially came out. This is my original this is about a 72 copy, and I haven't peeled it. It peels off to see the Naked Skin Banana. I never wanted to peel my copy off. I have other versions of it, but the Velvet Underground from New York and Nico, fantastic record. Heroin, what a great record. Sunday Morning, I'm Waiting for My Man, Andy Warhol obviously also did covers for a lot of artists. He did some Blue Note covers. And going along with that, I think, in a different sense, in 1967, is the Who Sell Out. What a great concept. And this album was photographed by David Montgomery, and it was meant to literally be the Who Sell Out. They were going to sell ads on here. So you hear all these ads for roto bass strings, and you hear the deodorant, and they wanted to sell to the clients, but to the advertisers, to the product companies. But of course, when they quoted them how many records they would sell, it wasn't enough. They would get more eyes on television and newspaper than they were on an album. So they kind of made up these sort of surreal ads that fit in, and BBC ads and jingles between the song. To me, this is the Who at their best, at their finest, their most creative. I love this record. Of course, it's right off of commercialism and pop art of the 1960s. Conceptual art, maybe in a little ways, pop art, conceptual art. Certainly not minimalism in this case, but a fantastic cover, truly an original. The Talking Heads, probably mainly because of David Byrne. More songs about buildings and food, and this is the first album that Brian Eno produced and collaborated with the Talking Heads. And this is Jimmy DeSanta, and this is a photo mosaic of, I think it's 252 Polaroids put together. And if you know Polaroids, when you pull the Polaroid out, if you can manipulate the actual image, like with a spoon and stuff, and push it as the processing, as it's developing, as it's warming up, you know, it comes from invisibility to this magical thing. But their artwork is always really interesting, pushed by David Byrne, sometimes conceptually created by David Byrne, but a fantastic cover. And this is sort of an era from space, a NASA photograph. But they did do, on Speaking in Tongues, a limited edition album. And this is the version, and it's faded to yellow over the years. This was done by the collage artist Robert Rauschenberg, who won a Grammy for this as limited edition package. And it's very much like these color separations when you're doing printing. And this is my copy I don't play. And it's just a beautiful, I think you can find this, and it's not, I'm surprised it's not as expensive on the aftermarket. But this is my original copy I've had. Obviously, it's very brittle, and it's prone to cracking, but luckily my copy is in pretty good shape. And aside from the yellowing, I do have a regular copy, but what a great record. And this is, Talking Heads. Look at this. It's like, I could just do this for the next. Conceptually, that's what I should do. I should just do this for like an hour and post it up and do ASMR. Created ASMR Talking Heads. You know you love the Talking Heads. Oh, Mazzy, grow up. You can't talk about art, minimalism, conceptual art without talking about the great covers by Hypnosis, Storm Thurgeson, not only for Pink Floyd, but many other bands. But to me, the most interesting conceptually is for Animals, mainly because this is not a Photoshop thing. Obviously, it's cleaned up way before Photoshop again. They had this inflatable pink flying over London or the Battersea Park Station on the Thames, and did this amazing surrealistic conceptual album package. And of course, the pig got loose, got away, floated away. They had to get it. They had to chase it down. Wish You Were Here, The Man on Fire is great. I think the most overrated one is Dark Side of the Moon. I love the music, but I think the covers, it fits possibly, but it's my least favorite, really. I think all their other covers are more wonderful. But this one, to me, I always will go for the pig. Whatever the pig does, go for it. We're supporting the pig. Ever see Pig 2? Oh, what's the movie? Not Pig 2. You know what I'm talking about. So someone out there knows what I'm talking about. The second, Pig in the City. Number 2, the Australian director who made Road Warrior and those movies. Fantastic movie with the bulldog or that little dog that, not the bulldog. Anyway, I digress, don't I? That's the conceptual nature of videos like this. So there you go. Now, this is a one that pisses people off. You know this album, right? Okay, this is a great album. Masayoshi Sukita photographed this beautiful picture. People say, what is he doing with his hand? The Bowie, conceptual artist all the way, ever-changing, chameleon-like, fantastic album cover. Now, when this album came out, the next day, some people thought, what a friggin' lazy cover. I think this is brilliant. I think this is amazing. This is Jonathan Barnbrook, and he did a number of, I've seen videos of him discussing this cover and the various presentations, and I think this is amazing. I think this is fabulous. You out there think it's lazy, you don't get it, you don't like conceptual work. You probably never hang out into a museum unless you're seeing, like, you know, Renoirs and you know, flower vases and landscapes and the hand of God and the touching Adam in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. But the conceptual side of it is great. Volta, 2007 Bjork. Bjork herself is a modernist, is an artist, is a conceptual, is avant-garde. Her music is electronic, is avant-pop, is creative, obviously coming from the post-punk group, the Sugar Cubes, out of Iceland. All her records are creative as hell. And this album, Volta, which is photographed by Nick Knight from the UK and German fashion designer Bernard Wilhelm, I just think is amazing. Now, I've done videos. I did a recent video with Michael Poetry on Plastic about fashion in art and design, and just, you should look, I'll put a link below because I think that's a nice discussion where we each show some fashion icons, some style icons. Bjork is definitely one of them, and I did mention her just in passing, but all her record covers and packaging are interesting, and just, you get that what the F moment when you see things like this, but it's just so brilliant. And, right? See, to me, conceptual art makes me smile. And you hate it, and you think it's silly, and I could do that, but you're not doing it. If you could do it, you'd be doing it. And, you know, now there are some modern artists and conceptual artists and people that I can't stand. I think they're very pompous. Now, maybe all these artists are pompous, I don't know, but that's just my take on it. Now, this is interesting. This is a little different. This is Beck, and this is Hyperspace. This is the Hyperspace 2020. This album came out in different incarnations. The first one had a color cover. This is the special NASA JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab version. I'm a big Beck fan. Some people just like the moodier Beck, or they like the Odelay Beck, but I have grown also to like this electronic pop Beck, and this is a very catchy, danceable album. I think this is a wonderful, almost like Dayglow 3D cover. This was done in collaboration with NASA JPL, with these great Japanese lettering, and he really wanted this to be sort of the everyday man out of Japan with the 1970s Toyota Celica car, and this. And there's also a wonderful book of space images from NASA that comes with it. Now, just, it has that modernist hyperspace feel, and I think they've done some video collaborations as well in this. And it's just kind of a wonderful, this is the limited edition version that came out with the artwork. And conceptual, maybe artistic, modernist, however you want to put it. Maybe it doesn't belong in this series, but it belongs here because Mazzy says it belongs. And Beck, Hyperspace, I love it. A band that started out that I got turned on to because of sort of their almost Americana folk sensibility, introspective, is The National. And there's two albums here that I want to show, and their last two, I believe. Oh, this is from 2013, and this is Trouble Will Find Me. I just love this cover image. Now, this is one of those examples where they didn't shoot this cover for the image. This album came out in 2013. The photograph was taken, I believe, in 2003, and they found it and put it together. And it's just a beautiful conceptual photograph. He's a conceptual artist, photographic, three-dimensional effects, but a fantastic, fantastic album. His name again is Bohun Yoon, Y-O-O-N, and fantastic. And the next one actually emulates, very similar. Our last album that came out in 2019, I Am Easy to Find. And this, to me, also is a fantastic cover. Now, this is a frame from a short film that the director Mike Mills made using the music from this album by The National. And it's the actress Alicia Vikander. I think she's Dutch, I believe. You recognize her from a lot of films, I'm sure. But it's just a beautiful, simplistic graphic cover. And you realize when you look these together, they almost seem like they would be the same artist, but they're not. So they used a frame for this. And a designer named Osk, O-S-K, took this frame and designed it for the album package. And I just think there's a minimalism, surrealism on the use of both of these covers that I really like. And lastly, I'm going with something that is very different. And I've mentioned this artist before, and the caretaker is Leland James Kirby, who is the artist that made this music. And what he does, it's called The Caretaker because he took it from the ballroom scenes from Stanley Kubrick's film The Shining. And there's that kind of ambient sound of the ballrooms in the background of the Jack Nicholson scenes. And what he does, what The Caretaker has done with a series of records, is taken old ballroom pop records and slowed them down so slow, sometimes played several at one time, where you get this kind of noise, ambient background. If you hear anything in the background, I've been playing this the entire length of this video. And the painter here is Ivan Seal. He does all these paintings, and there's a series of records I'm going to show you right now. And what I really like about him is how it's a full frame cover as if it's a canvas, and you see the stretching of the canvas on the back. Beautiful artwork, and they've done some installations, the two of them, where Ivan Seal's paintings and creations, large versions, are up at different galleries and museums as the music, as the ambient noise, ethereal music takes place. And these are series, some of these are from the Caretaker, but it's from the last few projects he's done. I just think these are so beautiful. And to me, this is where cover art shines and minimalist modernist art shines. So paintings by Ivan Seal, soundtrack by The Caretaker. Maslov, conceptually speaking. Hope you enjoy it. Like, subscribe, all the good stuff. Go to museums, support art galleries in your neighborhood or in your city or in your town, and support independent artists as well, musically as well as physically, graphically, and even conceptually. Mazzy loves you.